Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing great. I'm doing fabulous, thank you very much, and I am so delighted you've joined me this evening for a story, because nothing, as I always tell you over and over again, because I can't express it enough, is just how fabulous stories are. Nothing beats a good story, and I think you're really going to enjoy tonight's stories. And don't forget to leave a comment. It always helps with the algorithms, and I'm really grateful when you do that. It's fabulous to hear from you. And let's get on with our story, shall we? Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, the bell tingled at the Pig and Whistle RV Recreational Centre and Camping Ground as I opened the door of what appeared to be a sight office, or visitors' centre if you like, come shop, with a large sign hanging on the outside glass and steel door, which read, "Welcome to the Pig and Whistle. Opening hours 8:30 to 7 p.m. A young girl with a long angular face and honey-coloured skin, with shoulder-length bobbed hair that had been dyed a bright pink colour, with bangs and uneasy piercings in her nose and ears, stared at me questioningly through her narrowing eyes, as if she was trying to figure out who I was and what I was actually doing there. She tried to look grown up as she straightened up her slouched back, so she appeared taller than she actually was, and more intimidating, but she couldn't have been more than 15 or 16 years old, and her clumsy attempts to put on eyeliner looked more clown-like than elegant, as her long spider-leg eyelashes were congealed with way too much clumpy black mascara that was flaking off like old paint. Her black liner was streaming down her face, but to be fair, it was an excruciatingly hot day, and makeup in unforgiving weather like this, however professionally applied, was more than likely to run at the best of times. So maybe she hadn't been so cack-handed in the application after all. The searing heat unapologetically melted everything, and I could personally testify to that. "Who are you?" she asked me directly. And for a brief moment I didn't answer her. Who was I? It seemed such a strange, rather impertinent question to ask me. The young girl looked impatient, as if she didn't have all the time in the world to let me decide who I actually was. She was tapping her pen noisily and rather impatiently against a large open diary, stabbing the paper with her pen, leaving behind navy blue splotches of weeping ink on the page. She stared at me scornfully, through insolent large green eyes that rather reminded me of Percy, my cat, back at home, when he was not in a very favourable mood. She gave me a disdainful, contemptuous look, as if I was an annoying mosquito she'd seriously like to swat. I decided to inject some light-hearted humour into our conversation, to lighten the heavy atmosphere that seemed to have swaddled me rather claustrophobically since I'd entered the shop, and had found myself being eyed suspiciously by a petulant, sneering, rather cranky teenager. "Who am I? Oh, I'm Dolly Parton," I said with a big teasing smile. "Right, you're Dolly Parton, are you?" said the scoffing girl, giving me a disparaging frown that caused the sides of her mouth to droop downwards into an upside-down smile. She didn't appear to be remotely amused by my humour. "You think I was born yesterday, do you?" she said with a cantankerous fire in her eyes. "I might remind you, the country and western singer Dolly Parton is getting old these days, even if she does look good for her age. She has balloons for breasts and blonde hair, and you don't look remotely like her. Besides, you're in your 20s at a guess." She paused for a moment to take a deep breath. "I'd say you're 25, and I'm sorry, with all the facelifts in the entire world, as I live and breathe, you're not going to convince me you're Dolly Parton," she said reproachfully, running her eyes up and down my body with a critical, acrimonious gaze, making me suddenly feel conspicuously small. I was not exactly looking my very best after my long drive in the searing heat. I was lucky not to be wearing any makeup, because I'm sure it would have smudged all over the place. But my bedraggled, limp blonde hair was clinging to my head like a wet mop that had been used on a filthy floor, and was badly in need of a fragrant wash. I felt sticky and sweaty in my blue denim shorts and white t-shirt that did not look quite so white after some chocolate ice cream accidentally spilled down its front at the most recent rest stop I'd visited on my journey, when a 6-year-old boy had unscrupulously run into me head first, like a spirited, charging, bucking bronto, smashing his ice cream bang into the middle of my T-shirt, so it had splattered all over me, like mud on a windscreen window. The cone had banged into my shirt and then smashed onto the floor below, so that the floor was covered in a melted, creamy milk chocolate. The child's mother had belligerently marched towards me, grabbing her kid by the hand, glaring at me through furiously judgmental brown eyes. Her gaze had burned into me with a vitriolic defiance. "You should look where you're going, young lady. Look what you've done to my son. You've destroyed his ice cream. Thanks to you, I have to buy him another." The kid had burst into tears, crying, "Mummy, that lady broke my ice cream. She broke it on purpose, Mummy. She's horrible, horrible lady," he said, pointing to the carcass of chocolate lying on the floor, seeping chocolate for blood, and cone for bone, marrow, and sinew. "I know, sweetheart, it's quite shocking, isn't it? People these days never look where they're going. Don't you worry," she had said capriciously, shaking her head indignantly, glancing over her shoulders at me to give me a murderous look that was designed to kill those faint of heart, but not me. I was well used to overbearing women exactly like her. I was born to a mother who was constantly plastering the blame on me for anything that went wrong in her life. So being falsely accused for something that I hadn't done was a badge I regularly wore. I stood there, unable to say a single word, my face guiltily flushing a bright pink colour, and my inability to say anything back seemed to affirm my guilt for any eyes that may have tuned in to this drama. "Don't you worry, sweetheart. Mummy will get you another ice cream. Honestly, as I say, some people, where do they come from? Running around, never looking where they're going." Everyone at the rest stop had looked at me, as if I was the villain, when the kid had run into me, not the other way round. Now this teenager at the Pig and Whistle was judging me on less than a clean T-shirt that I was sporting. That was hardly my fault, but then again she didn't know that. But besides that, who was she, so quick to judge me anyway? I had known the moment I woke up that morning that this was one of those inauspicious days that you could smell as distinctly as jasmine on the wind, minus the intoxication, of course. I had experienced this bizarre prognostication, if you like, in one of those ghastly bathrooms at the rest stop that smelt of urine, with one of the toilets choked up with loo paper, as if someone had decided to use more than 50 rolls to wipe their derriere. So anyone else hoping to enjoy a similar privilege would likely be left very disappointed, for there was no paper left. I'd wiped the chocolate away with some soap and water, in one of those dingy sinks with a soiled wet T-shirt now clinging to my skin. Suffice to say, although I'd cleaned it up, if you looked close enough, the telltale dogged cocoa stain was still there. And now this surly teenage girl at the Pig and Whistle was staring right at it. I knew exactly what she was thinking. Dolly Parton, in a month of Sundays, would never in a million years look so sloppy. She was right, of course. Sloppiness to Dolly Parton was as alien to the woman as a weed is in a floral display at the flower show. I flushed bright red. The girl continued unabashedly. "Even with the best plastic surgeon in the world, as I was saying, Dolly Parton ain't going to look as young as you," she said pointedly, her eyes narrowing all the more. "I know plastic surgery has come a long way, but no one can look 20 again, can they? It's physically impossible, even with good genes." If this bolshy, rather sarcastic teenager had been a cat, this would have been the perfect moment for the cat to have reached out and scratched me with her sharp claws. But thankfully this girl was not a cat, and her nails were very short, looking suspiciously as if she nibbled them out of boredom, so I could breathe a sigh of relief and be grateful for small mercies, however miniature in size they might be. Before I could ask this very unaccommodating young girl for help in terms of direction to the nearest town, and tell her I was just pulling her leg about Dolly Parton, and explained that her question had taken me slightly off guard. In my book, asking someone who they are can be a wee bit rude. There are politer, more delicate ways of making such a forthcoming inquiry. Would it not be more appropriate to say, "Can I help you?" The young girl let out a long drawn-out sigh, as if she was growing increasingly frustrated with me. It didn't help that it was a hot, uncomfortable day, and it would seem her mood was as affronted and disagreeable as the insufferable heat. "Your name? What is your name?" she asked me, looking at me sarcastically. "If you're not going to give it to me, then you're in a spot of trouble, I'm afraid. Just so you know, I've not got a pitch number reserved under the name Dolly Parton. It's mid-August, and even if you are Miss Dolly Parton and a celebrity of note, I'm sorry, but we don't care here at the Pig and Whistle about all that kind of stuff. Even if you are royalty, we will not give you a pitch at a moment's notice. It never happens. We're booked up fully at this time of the year. So as Dolly Parton has not booked with us," she said, glancing down at the page of her diary through stubbornly narrow eyes, "I cannot possibly help you," she said sarcastically. In a trice the door of the Pig and Whistle opened, with a purposeful swing, as the bell tinkled, and a woman who I guessed was the girl's mother sashayed in like a refreshing cool breeze. For a moment I stared and stared at her. I'm not sure why. She was a very attractive woman in her 40s or even 50s, although it seemed so crass to be trying to figure out her age. Women like her are ageless. She was dressed so vintage, like a very glamorous 1950s housewife, wearing a full pink and white polka dot dress, clinched in at the waist with a thin pink belt that exaggerated her hourglass silhouette, as this woman had curves where curves were meant to be, and on her feet a pair of strappy corked sandals that accentuated a meticulously neat pink pedicure. I noticed her black hair was done in a Marilyn Monroe undone bob style, which was incredibly popular in the 1950s, which was in keeping with that 50s classical look. My guess was she liked the fashion of the 50s, embracing it eagerly, and not conforming to modern-day stereotypes of how we might be expected to dress or what we should wear. I liked her immediately for that obvious free spirit that refused to wear the fashion trends everybody else was sporting, priding herself in being uniquely different, like a black and bay horse in a field of zebras. This woman was nonconformist and individualistic. She wore the traditional scarlet lipstick on her lips and dark eyeliner around her eyes, the very distinctive make-up look of the 1950s. She was striking, and for someone running the Pig and Whistle RV recreational centre, in my book she was rather too glamorous for such a job. She'd have looked much more befitting on a film set at Universal Studios, starring in the likes of Sunset Boulevard or All About Eve. "Ma'am," said the teenage girl behind the counter, rudely pointing an accusatory finger at me, as if I'd been caught shoplifting. "This lady over here says she's Dolly Parton," she said, rolling her eyes in the back of her head, as if to say I was completely delusional, off my trolley. And can you believe this woman claiming to be someone she so obviously is not? She didn't seriously believe I thought I was Dolly Parton, did she? Did she really have no sense of humour? She continued, "I told her we're booked up for August, fully booked. And Dolly Parton has not booked a pitch with us, and I told her even if she had, everyone would know about it, everyone in town. News gets around these parts faster than the wind, and faster than social media, to be sure." The teenager's girl's mother laughed. She had a voice like honey, from the sweetest of North American flowers, and was a quintessential Southern belle in every single regard. She shook her head. "Oh, honestly, Tessa, listen to yourself, sweetheart. Do you have no sense of humour? This lovely young lady here was just pulling your leg. She was teasing you. Of course she doesn't have a pitch, because she's not that kind of visitor, are you?" she said, catching my eyes, giving me a friendly wink, accompanied by a bright, warm smile that showed off her straight white teeth. "This young lady here," she said, pointing to me, "must be your aunt's goddaughter, Ellie. She's come here to help look after the shop, to relieve you of some of your load. She's here to replace Sherry, who sadly left us only last week to have her baby. Remember I told you Ellie would come? Well, possibly would come." The girl's mother turned around to look at me through her warm green eyes. "It is very good to see you, Ellie. I'm so surprised you decided you'd come after all. That is good news. My sister informed me that your mother said you weren't very keen on the job, but I'm thrilled you've changed your mind, dear. To be honest, I thought you weren't going to make an appearance, or even bother to show up. Welcome to the Pig and Whistle. If the truth be told, I was about to put an advert for the job online, and now you've arrived out of the blue, like a promising easterly wind. Oh, this is so serendipitous and quite marvellous, and your timing, I hasten to say, could not be more perfect. I'm delighted you're here. But no, you're definitely not Dolly Parton," she teased, giving me a cheeky wink and looking at my flat chest quite pointedly. "But I love the humour, simply love it. It's enchanting, quite delightful. And in weather as scorchingly hot and unforgiving as this, we need humour to soften the blow of this unkind, inhospitable day. Isn't it a frightful stinker today? People come to the mountains to escape this god-awful heat, so we're not used to weather as unkind and as vicious as this. It's on days like this that I envy the Eskimos in their delightful igloos out there, somewhere in the freezing cold weather." The next thing I knew, she had impulsively enveloped me in a warm hug, kissing my forehead, leaving a smudge of scarlet lipstick on my face, which she wiped away apologetically with her finger. Close up she smelt like Lily of the Valley, and although it was sweltering outside, her perfect makeup did not even budge an inch. How could she look so fabulous, as if she stepped out of a cool, refreshing shower or a bandbox, whereas me and her daughter, and probably the rest of the population, looked like flagging flowers that needed to be propped up to stand up straight and be brought back to life with some smelling salts, or we might just faint under the cruel blows of the sun. "As I was saying, Ellie, it's such a delight to finally meet you. I'm Ginger, by the way, but then you probably know that from your mother, I'm most sure. Do you know the last time I saw you, you were only 4 years old, and you were at my sister's house getting your hands very dirty in the strawberry bushes. Your mouth was covered in red stains. Oh, you did look quite the sorry sight. My sister said you must have eaten a ton of strawberries. Her strawberry beds had been completely devoured and demolished, and there were red stains over your bonny little dress. It was so adorable." "Why does that not surprise me?" said the young teenager, staring pointedly at the chocolate stain on my T-shirt. "Methinks Ellie here is not exactly the tidiest eater." "Oh, Tess, you are dreadfully rude." She turned to me. "I do apologise, Ellie. I can't apologise enough for my daughter. Her manners melted away, I'm afraid, under the sun today, like chocolate. You mustn't mind Tess here," said Ginger. "She gets cranky in this weather, don't you, dear? I know because I'm in the firing line of her sarcasm." "Teenagers," she said, shaking her dark curls in exaggeration. "Who would have them? I know I wouldn't have given my life over again." "Mum, why do you always say things you don't mean? And don't patronise me," said Tess, crinkling up her face in annoyance. "I hate it when you talk about me as if I'm a baby. I'm 16 years old, not going on 2. "Well, maybe I wouldn't, sweetheart, if you were a wee more polite to our guests. I keep telling you to tame the sharp tongue of yours." "Now, if you don't mind dreadfully," said Ginger, directing her focus on me, "I will love you and leave you with my daughter here. We're in the grip of an emergency, and my daughter needs to come with me. We have to pop into town very quickly. An emergency has occurred and requires me and my daughter's prompt attention. So as I was saying, Ellie, your timing is impeccable, and thank goodness for that. The good Lord can be so good, can he not? And bring unlikely angels to our rescue. And today, Ellie, you are that angel. I know it's a bit presumptuous, leaving you here in the thick of things, but do you mind dreadfully running the Pig and Whistle for me while we're away for a few hours? It's all very straightforward. If anyone comes in here, check their names in the diary,
and tell them what pitch they're on. Make sure they've paid in full. If there's a pink tick there, you know that they've paid. Hand them this information leaflet and point them to the map showing the locations of the pitches that are on the back of the leaflet. All you need to do is welcome them to the Pig and Whistle. Tell them to enjoy their stay here. And if they need anything, to come to the visitors' centre, and they only need to ask. Over there on that counter are leaflets of things they can do here in the Blue Mountains. Recreational activities, sports, places to eat, and so forth. We won't be gone for very long. If they want to buy anything from this store, souvenirs or food items, just charge it to their pitch, and they can settle the cost with me later with their account. When I've got more time on my hands, I'll teach you how to use that ancient cash register over there, but right now I'm too busy to do that. We don't use a computer here. I don't want to risk the computer crashing. I prefer the old ways personally. She steered me behind the counter, patting my back affectionately. She turned her attention to her daughter. Tess, I'm afraid I've got some rather bad news. As I said, you need to come with me. I need your help with your grandmother. She's only gone and fallen down the attic ladder. Boris Goldberg found her lying there in a heap on the floor, groaning in pain. Good job he checked in on her. He's just given me a call. We need to check up on your grandmama at once. Is she going to be all right, Mum? Asked Tess, her eyes growing wide with concern. I was glad to see this cocky teenager appeared to have a heart underneath all the bravado. Well, your grandmother said it's only a sprain. Boris says she's hobbling around her house like a drunken sailor. But we need to check up on her, don't we, to make absolutely sure she's all right. Your grandmother always underplays everything. You know what she's like. We need to take her to accident and emergency to just check she hasn't broken anything. Honestly, that mother of mine is the end. What was she doing rummaging around a dusty attic in the first place? I mean, I ask you. I warned her to let me go into the attic if she ever needed to retrieve anything. She seems to have forgotten that she's not 23 anymore. She's not nimble on her feet. But will she listen to a word I say? Will she take any well-meaning instruction and advice? Absolutely not. The woman is mulishly stubborn, and as contrary as that girl in the kids' nursery rhyme. Mary, Mary, quite contrary, that one. I gather she thought she'd some vintage comics in the attic somewhere that can fetch a hefty price tag online. But that attic looks like a bomb has hit it, so finding those comics will be like looking for a needle in a haystack. I was about to interrupt Ginger's earnest conversation with her daughter, to protest and exclaim that I was not actually Ellie, and I was simply here to ask directions to the nearest town. I was hopelessly lost, and my GPS had lost its signal, when both mother and daughter scooted out of the sight office, giving me warm smiles. Even Tessa managed to give me a half-hearted grin, possibly because I'd momentarily relieved her from her laborious job, and who could blame her for that? A prickle of sweat broke out on my forehead, from something a lot more ominous than the stifling August heat. I watched the duo from the window. Ginger was patting Tessa comfortingly on the back, and the two of them dashed down the steps of the sight office to the asphalt parking bay, shaded under the umbrella-like canopies of the tall, lofty oak trees. Ginger opened the door of a white Land Rover Discovery, and her daughter slipped into the car on the opposite side, so she was seated next to her mother. They both put on their safety belts. Ginger, with both her hands on the steering wheel, pressed her foot down on the accelerator. The engine purred. The car sprang into action unabashedly, whizzing down the driveway towards the uncongenial road, where only moments before I'd found myself hopelessly lost, and had sighed with relief when I'd seen a sign for the Pig and Whistle. Now here I was, on unfamiliar turf, filling in the shoes of a young woman called Ellie, and hoping with all my heart that no one would enter the sight office while Tess and Ginger were away. It was such a dreadfully hot day, but thankfully an upright, rather noisy fan on the floor was blowing out cool air upon me. I was so thirsty, my throat parched and dry. I would have gladly helped myself to a bottle of water from the stockpiles of drinks on display in the refrigerator, but I knew that that wasn't my place to do so. The sight office was actually a visitor's centre and shop combined. Well, that's the best way to describe it, with wooden-panelled walls covered in framed pictures of the Blue Mountains. There was another picture with a mother bear with 3 cubs standing close to one of the RVs at the Pig and Whistle. Another was a mountain lion sneaking up to an unsuspecting herd of deer. Another was of a man standing over a silvery lake with a fishing rod in his hand, reeling in a 5-foot monster. The shop boasted shelves of sun hats, suntan lotion, plasters, mosquito repellent, headache tablets, cough medicine, tissues, hand creams, lip ice, torches, citronella candles, matches, barbecue coals, fire lighters, water bottles, T-shirts with signs that read the Blue Ridge Mountains, windbreakers, socks, sleeping bags and blankets. And then there were shelves of food from baked beans, tuna, sweet corn, mayonnaise, bread, milk, tea, coffee, cookies, graham crackers, marshmallows, chocolates, chips, and a fridge full of food like butters, cheeses, sausages, bacon, burgers, marinated kebabs, and all manner of cold drinks, from Diet Cokes to Mountain Dew. And last but not least was a large freezer cabinet containing cartons of ice cream and single-serving ice creams and lollies. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. I was praying hard that no one would turn up, but I was to be disappointed, for my hopes were short-lived. My prayers seemed to fall on mute ears. Before long, the bell on top of the door jangled. My heart began to leapfrog in my chest. My throat suddenly felt terribly scratchy and dry. I knew this was going to happen, being left to my own devices to deal with strange customers when I didn't even work here. This was insane. What was I doing here anyway? Why hadn't I told Ginger that I was not her sister's goddaughter, for goodness sake? I could smell the customers before I saw them, as the sight office was flooded with the powerful, nauseating stench of a cheap, flowery fragrance the woman was wearing, that made me sneeze, and was enough to bring on a throbbing headache, if you weren't careful. An elderly gentleman and woman entered the Pig and Whistle sight office. The woman frowned when she saw me sneeze. Did no one tell her that her overpowering fragrance would wake the living dead? But unlike Tess, who would lightly have expressed her candid opinion about the matter, I wisely held my tongue. "Hello there. Where is Ginger?" asked the man, in an almost brusque tone of voice. "Sorry, she's not here," I told him. "She's called out on an emergency. I'm standing in for her." "That's an awful pity," said the man, his shoulders sagging in abject disappointment. I guess I was a sorry, bedraggled, rather unglamorous sight, compared to the breathtaking Ginger. It would be like comparing the male eastern bluebird, with its vivid bright blue feathers, compared to its grey female equivalent, with only a suggestion of blue on its wings. No prizes for guessing who was the drab bird, and who was the vivid, exciting one in these circumstances. This poor man was meeting the drab grey bluebird this morning, when he'd anticipated a far more gregarious, electrifying reception from Ginger, which must have been somewhat dispiriting for him, especially on a cruel day like this, when even the plants in the countryside were crumbling in drooping, subdued clusters under these objectionable, unendurable, scorching conditions. "I'm Porter Collins," he told me. "This is my wife Deirdre. Ginger usually gives us a pitch, number 13. Would you check if that is our pitch today, please?" The elderly woman, with her blue rinse hair and steely grey eyes that did not miss a trick, gave me a wry, rather dry smile, studying me suspiciously through her narrowing gaze. Why was everyone giving me funny looks today? Was there something in the water, or had my soiled T-shirt invited much objectionable scrutiny? Or was it that these 2 elderly people did not like someone new filling in for Ginger or Tess? I suspected the latter was probably the case, as likewise both my grandparents were rigidly set in their ways, and hated change of any kind with a zealous passion. Indeed, they viewed strangers with great suspicion, which was something I could never get my head around. My grandfather would always say, "But we don't know her," when they went to the grocery store to buy milk, and had discovered someone new behind the counter at the grocer's in their small rural town. I had to explain to them that the milk was not going to change just because it was sold to him by a strange face that he did not know. "But how do we know she can be trusted?" he would say, concerning the poor lady at the till. "Supposing she slipped something into the milk," my grandmother would intercede, her blue eyes widening in abject alarm. "I mean, you hear stories, don't you? all over the news about people being clandestinely poisoned. I thought my grandparents were winding me up, but it seemed their eccentricities were getting worse and worse by the day, the older they became, and paranoia had become a very real issue for the both of them. To be fair, both my grandparents were close to 100 years old, so I should cut them some slack and make some allowances for them. I opened the black diary to check for the Collinses' names. I gave them a smile. They had paid for their pitch in full and were marked under pitch 13. I coughed to clear my throat. "Yes, you're both marked for pitch 13, I told them, handing the woman a leaflet. She waved my hand away. "No need for that, dear. We've been coming here for years, you know. We know all there is to know about the Pig and Whistle, don't we, dear? It's the best RV recreational centre and camping ground you can find in these parts, let me tell you. Lovely views, plenty of privacy here. You can't get better than that, I find. I'm very grateful that we're at pitch 13, I have to say," she said, clasping her heart tightly and letting out a sizable relieved sigh. "Ginger is very reliable like that. She never lets us down, does she, dear? God bless her cotton socks. She's a very good woman, she is. Heart of gold she has, you know." I think there must have been a furrow line developing between my brows, because Mrs. Collins obviously thought that I need an explanation for her rather peculiar remark. 13 is my lucky number, you see, she explained. "People say it's bad luck, you know. Me and my husband find the reverse is true for us. Isn't that so, dear?" she said, looking at her husband to affirm her idiosyncratic claims. Mr. Collins nodded his head in agreement. "Wherever we go, we always choose the number 13, he said. "It never lets us down. We even own 13 goldfish, and when one of them dies, all hell breaks loose, doesn't it, sweetheart?" "It's true," said the woman, her crepey eyes widening. "On the day that one of our goldfish died, my very best friend Olive had a stroke. I tripped over a plant pot, sprained my ankle. It was too terrible for words. Our elderly dog died on the doorstep, for no apparent reason, and some boy on the street threw a brick through our window, in a moment of madness. I returned from the grocer's with low-fat yoghurt instead of full cream. It was very inauspicious. One thing went wrong after another, you could say. So my husband here," she said, pointing a finger in his chest, "went off to buy another goldfish. So the number was now 13, and once again, everything was happily restored back to normal." "And let me guess, your troubles went away," I said. "Yes, as it happens, they did," she said, raising a brow, looking at me incredulously. "How did you know about that?" "Oh, it's just a lucky guess," I said, giving her a watery smile. The day sailed by painfully slowly, with a few more people receiving their pitch numbers. I'd point to the map at the back of the leaflet to explain where they could put up their tent or park their RV. For someone who wasn't used to speaking to strangers, I wasn't doing so badly. Many looked as crumpled as the sweet wrappers in the front seat of my car, as this heat had left everybody flagging. Everyone except Ginger, of course. I was beginning to feel deflated. I was dying of thirst and looking longingly at the water in the refrigerator. I was also starving hungry, as I hadn't eaten anything all morning, apart from a cup of coffee at the rest stop. The nearest I got to any food was a run-in I had with a kid with his chocolate ice cream that sadly evaded my mouth and landed on my T-shirt and the floor, of course. Let's just say in this unrelenting heat wave, the thought of a chocolate ice cream was literally making me drool. While Scarlett and Tess were away, I had time to think. I had only $50 to my name, and that would not get me terribly far. I needed a job desperately. Would it be so bad to pretend that I was Ellie Ginger's sister's goddaughter for a couple of days. I surmised that after a couple of days I'd come clean to Ginger, tell her the truth, and by then I'd have made myself indispensable. I mean, Ginger did mention she was going to advertise for the job anyway. Would it be so wrong to impersonate her sister's goddaughter? I had serendipitously come along at the perfect time. She had said as much. Maybe I was meant to work here after all. It would mean I'd live on the site and get paid for the privilege, and as far as I could see, living around spectacular scenic vistas like this, waking up to the natural world every morning, would be a pleasurable experience indeed. So there we are, that's the end of part 1 of our story. Part 2 is tomorrow night, and I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.